Hey friends, kind of early spring, don't you think?
It is an early spring this year.
Here in
Yeah,
Wisconsin,
but I'm not going to complain.
we're almost eating our first nettles.
Yeah, right on the side of the house that's really warm and south facing, they're starting to grow, but I feel like there's not enough of them to eat yet. Like this big.
And when we do, that's going to be an opportunity, like everything else in life, to either just eat the nettles or to eat the nettles, right?
It could be a t-shirt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
eat the nettles.
Life is short, eat the nettles.
Because what we want to share with you today is something that we're calling, we're going to see how that all goes. We've got some wind today that we're dealing with, so we're going to block the microphone off and, as usual.
Filming outside, always an adventure.
Is a concept that we read about called micro connections, micro moments. And we've been taking this idea and adopting it in our own lives to some pretty cool effect, I would say.
Well, what is a micro moment of connection?
Well, it's small.
Micro, you might say, which makes me think of micro mini cars. Did you have those?
Yeah.
And that guy who could talk really fast?
Oh, yeah. We have to sped him up or not?
I don't think so. I think it was practice.
He was just
talent.
good at it.
Yeah. Which just goes to show you can get good at anything.
So there's good research and also just the feeling of it. So we know that being connected with people is good for us on a lot of levels.
I would say I think science is proving that isolation is not in general.
It's not so great.
Yeah, I mean it totally depends upon each individual and where you're isolated, but the feeling of if you would say, yeah, I feel isolated, then that's not good. Because some people really enjoy, I'm going to go off into the Adirondacks for 3 weeks and be by myself. They wouldn't say, yeah, I feel isolated, but you can be in a whole crowd of people and feel completely alone.
Yeah. So what they're talking about usually when they've done this research is family connections and the really strong, enduring connections we have with, for instance, really good friends, your closest circle of friends. So we know that's good stuff, but there's this woman that came along. She's been doing this research for a couple decades now. Barbara Fredrickson. Yeah. And she said, what about these little micro moments? So the classic idea, you're walking down the street, you see a stranger, you smile at them, they smile back. Do those matter at all? We know they feel good, right? There might be a little spurt of brain chemical, but do they have any enduring effect? And that's been her body of research, is to try to show, she goes on this theory that basically is trying to show that those...
Protect the microphone!
that these build. So those little micro moments are also really, really important. And those are easier to forget about because in our culture, we've got our stuff to do and we've got our places to be. And we don't often take the time for these micro moments, these little spots of connection.
Well, is she the one that said it's kind of like falling in love, but for a really quick time?
Oh, yeah.
And not like falling in love romantically, intimately, like, sexual or anything like you're going to marry me. But I feel like we've all experienced a moment where we're, on a bus and the person we sit next to just all of a sudden starts up a really interesting conversation. And you think, wow, this person is so nice. This is so fun. Or maybe it's just a really brief encounter. You're getting your coffee and there's this certain feeling that is more than just like, hey, how you doing? It's like, wow, I met that person's humanity and they met mine for just a second. And it builds inside of you, I think. I mean, listen, if someone cuts you off in traffic, that can ruin your whole day. If someone is mean to you and rude to you without any provocation, that can ruin our day. And I think those things can build up. Why is the opposite? Couldn't that be true? And they're finding that also for things like meditation. Multiple single breath meditations throughout the day add up. Same for exercise. Multiple 5 minutes, 10 minutes here or there, that can add up. So why would these little micro connections not also add up to a fulfilling life? And I think maybe not valuing those or paying attention to them can be a detriment to us.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have that in our life, we're not getting those extra little benefits.
That's a really good point. Never quite thought of it that way. How those one little negative thing can squash our whole day sometimes. So what we're doing here, obviously, is we're talking about negative and positive emotions. So I want to qualify something here, because that can be a tricky place. There's, I think, some benefit to separating emotions into two basic categories, though I'm going to suggest we don't use negative and positive as those categories. I'll tell you why in a second. But there's also, in our culture, there can be an idea of just, you should not have any feelings like sadness or anger or anything else. And then we can spend a lot of time trying to repress those feelings and resist them. And
yeah, it doesn't go very
that
well.
ends up to be a lot of extra stress. So I like to think of these emotions as either, well, I guess I don't have a good word for the other ones, but the negative ones I often think of as resistance-based emotions. And so the other ones I would think of maybe as immersive-based emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And when we think of it this way, you can kind of see how the structure of these emotions work. A resistance-based emotion, let's say judgment or fear, that puts up walls and it narrows our focus. So when we put up walls, we narrow our focus. When we're resisting something, we're putting up shields in front of us. Then our world becomes smaller. We actually notice less. It kind of turns off our emotions and we get stuck into just what's happening in our mind. And that is a mindset that reduces our connection. By connection, I'm using that word in a broad sense, with the world, with the people
Just
around
our
us.
awareness of what's happening and what we're experiencing at that moment in time.
Yeah, even our connection with ourselves, as you say there, our awareness of what we're experiencing. All that gets degraded by putting up those shields. Now, when we have a, quote, positive emotion or an immersive emotion, like joy or happiness or just awe at something that we're seeing, then that tends to be a throw down the shields, break down the barriers, and opening emotion. And so every time we experience one of these, we're training our minds. We're training our minds to be more and more closed, or we're training our minds to be more and more open.
Yeah, well, that has ramifications. When you talked about putting up walls or shields, I immediately thought of some of our students that we have had in the past at ReWild University and how they outright confess that they use their cell phones as a protection from having to engage with anybody in society. You're walking down the street, you're on a bus, you're waiting in line, bring up the phone, I'm unavailable. But that has a lot of negative side effects. But the biggest one is just that then we miss the opportunity to have micro moments of connection and the ability to see that we aren't actually alone and that as human beings, we can connect even to someone who we don't know their name, we'll maybe never see them again. And there's something about that, about knowing I've had this moment with another human being, and we get that in nature a lot. We're not as afraid to do it with birds or trees as we are with people.
Yeah, there's something built into our worldview, I think, for a lot of us that's sort of separation based. It's built into kind of the dominant, there's various scientific mindsets we can have, but the dominant one that sees everything in sort of what I call a mechano-linear mindset, and in some of the dominant religions which see a separation between things. So that separateness can kind of create a feeling of loneliness, a feeling of isolation, and certainly doesn't contribute to just feeling immersed and wrapped up in everything that we see and experience around us. So for me at least, I feel like there's this huge difference between the times in my life when I felt more isolated. I'm saying that in a kind of a very holistic, even spiritual way. And the times when I felt really integrated and connected with life, the universe, and everything.
42.
That's it. That's the answer, baby.
Well, okay, so here's my question. Say I want to do more of these and I want to pay attention to it. How do I engage in these more? How do you do this?
Yeah,
especially if you're somebody who's kind of nervous about putting yourself out there.
Yeah. So research aside, I think we can step back and realize that there's power in this micro word, that designation, micro. That can make us feel a lot more comfortable. Because some of the exercises we do with students are, okay, we're going to go into this place, into this town, and I want you each to select a person and go up and engage them in conversation. And ideally pick somebody that's a little bit intimidating for you, that you find to be beautiful, or you find to look a little scary looking, or whatever it's going to be. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about easing into these things with micro moments. Flash somebody a smile. Super easy. You can do it from a car window, so you don't even have to see the result if they are going to smile back or not. That's a really easy way to start training our mind to reach out and engage a little bit. But I have found the big thing for me with these has been to try to just see some of these micro moments each day. And they can be with people you're comfortable with. So for me, it's when I see you or see the girls, take 2 seconds, literally, just 2-3 seconds, and look at you and just feel a feeling of appreciation for a moment. This starts to bleed out, I think, because what we're doing is we're creating a habit of noticing the little things around us. So then we might be doing this video and there's some leaves. Whoa.
Blowing in the wind.
Blowing in the wind. We're going to have to cuddle up really tight to try to block the wind.
I think it's still coming from over that way.
So then one of these leaves goes across the ground, and that becomes something that I realize is worth paying attention to. So this doesn't even have to be with other humans. These can be moments of connection with the world around you, going into our senses and just experiencing something. It's really beautiful. It can be nothing. When a leaf goes across the ground, what? It's just stupid. I've got more important things to do. Or it can be almost mind-blowingly amazing. The play of shadow and light, the way it twirls and dances and changes direction, that itself can be this little teeny moment of wonder.
You know, there's another thing that I think is helpful, especially when you're dealing with people, and that's kind of to take the role-playing approach. I sometimes use this with the girls and say, imagine that you are in a video game, let's say, or you know, it could be paper and dice, whatever, but you have this character, you're in their body, but that's not really you, you know, so what are you going to do that's going to be fun? In a game or a video game, you're going to go up to people and talk to them and interact a little bit more. So what if you just kind of pull yourself up to like a third-person observer of yourself and kind of go, hey, maybe Rebecca should go over to that person and just, you know, thank them for their service. You know, if you see someone's, you know, got on a vet hat, and just say, hey, thanks for your service. Or, you know, maybe pick someone who's easy. I'm going to tell you right now, some of our older folks, if you're out shopping and you see someone that looks like maybe they're definitely someone's grandma or great grandma, just be like, smile at them and say, hey, hope you're having a good day. Or I love your smile when they smile back at you. It can light them up, and you can almost pretend that that's what your video game character is here to do, is just to have these little micro connections with all sorts of people. But that can also take you out of the equation, like you're, you know, not being rejected if they don't smile back at you. It's just, you know, there kind of goes an NPC and you'll try the next one. So anyway, that's kind of one little trick I have.
We've got to plug our book here.
Our book. Oh, yeah.
So if you're watching this thing and you haven't read Becoming Dungeon Master, that's what that book is all about. Kind of gamifying life to take us out of fear and more into playfulness. Just the way you were explaining there.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is noticing. What's a day feel like when you do just do the ships passing in the night with every single person?
Feels like it just blows by. And you
Yeah.
don't even notice it.
And then what does a day feel like when you do pay a little more attention, even if it is just to your dog or your family members? You don't have to go out into public and start totally doing it, although I think it's fun. But just what does it feel like at the end of your day? Do you notice that you feel maybe just a little more uplifted or a little more satisfied or a little bit more like you were present for the life that you're living? Because I think that's the bottom line, is to feel like this is a yummy life and it's worth showing up for and living it.
So I think the bad news overall is that, like,
restrictive news.
yes, like anything else, is that this takes some mind training. And there's not really a magic formula where all of a sudden we're just going to be loving every micro moment that we experience and feeling more open to life. But that's also tied to the good news, which is that we all have this neuroplasticity. We all are able to shift and change our mind all the time. And if we start right now, we start today, grasping some of these micro moments, tasting our food, sharing a couple extra words with someone you love. Just go out of your way to say something nice and see where that leads. Engage with a stranger, smile at somebody, hold a door for someone. I mean, we do that a lot, hold doors. And
just looking
everybody
into
always
someone's
loves
eyes.
that. Like, hey,
just
thanks.
look into someone's eyes. You don't even have to smile like, wee! You can just have this warmth and just look in their eyes, and be like, hey, I see you.
And understand that everything that you do like that is shaping you, is becoming the new person that you're becoming tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. Because we really aren't the same person that we were yesterday. We're always shifting and changing. And it's so gradual that it can be difficult to see. And that's why it usually runs on autopilot, and why many of us find ourselves over 10, 20 years of life starting to shift into places that maybe we don't want to be. But if we're conscious about, as much as we can, about each moment and how it shapes us and what effect it might have, then we start to look at all of life differently. And it just is enjoyable, because when you see those micro moments, it's awesome. It feels good.
Well, and one thing I noticed is that when I think of my life, I often think of it in broad sweeping terms. Like, these are all the things I have to do today. These are all the things I have to do this week. But if I'm paying attention to my micro moment and I think to myself, oh, this is a micro moment right now, in a weird way, it brings me right to the moment I'm in. I mean, it's not weird, I guess. And I'm suddenly there, and instead of living in list land, like, oh, here's all the things I've got, it's like, oh, here's this one moment that I'm actually in. And it's just such a good feeling to kind of say, hey, yeah, look, I'm here right now. I don't know, for me, it's really useful.
If we could all just live like that, what it would feel like, and how it would shift, I think, our whole world, because so much of the ickiness of our world comes from these resistances, comes from not seeing what's there in front of us, comes from not appreciating those moments, the one we're in, and seeing how precious it is, and having gratitude for whatever it is we're experiencing right now. So,
yeah, tell us what you think about this. If you've noticed that those kind of little miniature moments of connection make a difference for you, and how you go about engaging in them. And then if you're somebody who, well, anybody, if you find yourself kind of wanting to pull out your phone in any kind of setting where there's people around or things to notice, just try for a couple times. Say, the next 2 times I want to pull out my phone, I'm not going to, and I'm going to see if I can just get involved in a micro moment. Look, there's a beautiful green bug crawling on that leaf right there. Micro moment, totally.
Should we show everybody?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you do the complete here.
The complete?
Yeah, I'll finish up.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to wrap up here.
The wrap. Here's a micro moment. Let's see if it'll focus.
Yeah, probably not. I think you're going to have to. Oh, yeah. Totally. Right there. Thank you for joining us. And we're so grateful. A lot of times your comments turn into micro moments for us.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and so it's just really, really special that we can all share. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
All right. Love to you all, my friends. And we'll talk with you in the comments.